Thank you very much for your introduction. And thanks, first of all, the organizers to invite me, and me means also us, because this presentation will be complemented by Anna Berti-Schumann, who is working on a PhD thesis on citizen sensing. Oh, this is strange, because here's written citizen science. Now, what does that mean? Is it this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Citizen science is actually there already for tens and tens of years. And maybe you have participated in citizen science. If you like birds, you can count the birds in your garden collectively, and that will be provided to science people. So citizen science is already there, but this presentation will mainly deal with citizen sensing, which is a kind of subcategory. I will explain that later. It is different. Also a different problematic area will be addressed, which is health in cities. I haven't heard it, actually. Health is very important. Think of biking through the city, and there's too high level of air pollutants. Think of noise in the city. Not only the city, but also around the airports and maybe hubs of railways. So there's a lot of things going on there. Smart cities. This presentation will be about smart citizens. And hopefully it is not an ugly duck. Okay, let me see why we are interested in smart cities, and that is because smart cities have smart citizens. Cities are primarily collections of different stakeholders with different interests. So you have the citizens, you have, in some cases, a collection of businesses which they may have the same interests, but they may also have different interests. Citizens are central in this presentation, and citizens get smarter and smarter. Imagine that 20 years ago, the level of education of citizens was lower. Now you have among the citizens people that have had an academic education, that they know about what is happening actually in terms of environmental assessment projects. So let's have a look. The question is citizen sensing a new source for particular types of policy making? So this policy making issue is actually in the background of this presentation. Coming back to some more formal definitions. So what is citizen science? Citizens there measure, they produce data, and they kind of deliver it to scientists. It is the active participation of lay people in research, not that much policy making. But what is citizen sensing is that lay people are acting as kind of intelligent interpreters through networks in which they actually observe, report, collect, analyze, disseminate information through sensor and mobile technologies. There is an important element of technology here involved, already addressed by Rudolf in one of the previous presentations. So that is an interesting situation, because technology is moving. Sensing is getting more and more accurate. There is now also so-called mobile sensing. In a project in the city of Zurich, sensors are placed on trams. Not only fixed on buildings, but also on trams. But this is not citizen sensing, this is more citizen science. Actually, they are related, the two. If you take citizen science broad, citizen sensing is a part of citizen science. Citizen sensing is inherently bottom-up, whereas citizen science is generally top-down, so an authority or a public institution needs data and asks for support or help of citizens. So generally top-down citizen science, while citizen sensing is bottom-up. Citizen sensing actually arises from a feeling of distrust. Distrust between the citizen and the authority. That's a very important point. So citizens feel unhappy, they are not understood, they don't trust the measurement. There may be an information monopoly at the side of the authorities. So citizen sensing, point 2, is more oriented to policy making than citizen science. Citizen science is not policy oriented. Citizen sensing also requires as a precondition the reliance on some forms of new sensor technology. And as I told you, there's a lot of progress there, so the accuracy is increasing of sensor technology. They can better sense. The accuracy is increasing. You have mobile sensing. There's another thing, granularity or, okay, that's the word, granularity is also improving. They're getting smarter, the sensors. They're getting smaller, you can more easily carry them. There's even a development that you can have the sensors in your coat and measure what is happening around you in terms of noise, in terms of air quality, etc. Citizens, lay people, they gain increased awareness, sense of responsibility, and learning experience. Actually, you could see all of our story in terms of learning experiences and better awareness of responsibility, including that. Okay, let's move a bit quicker. So it is about the detection of physical presence, citizen sensing, physical presence, and the conversion of the data gained into a signal that can be understood by an observer or an instrument. That is the formal definition of citizen sensing, of sensing. And citizens act as hardware, sensor, creating situational awareness. It was also mentioned by Rudolf. So it creates a lot of opportunities for designing aware policies. At the same time, there is also the question of technical issues that may arise according to accuracy of whether it's measured in the right way, whether the data is valid, and whether the data are also accepted by the authority, because that is one of the issues. Okay, now it's going a bit wrong. This is the good one. So, which conditions needs to be satisfied before we consider sensing or measurement as citizen sensing? Particularly in the PhD of Anna, we focus on public health issues caused by environmental factors. So it could be air pollution, it could also be radiation and magnetic waves. There was news about the potential influence of magnetic waves on health of children caused by electricity grids. Initiation of the sensing is primarily led by the citizens, that is clear. They are the ones that take the initiative. There are risk factors, but these are made measurable by non-professional citizens. They use smartphones and network sensors, so there are a lot of criteria before or Anna decides this is citizen sensing and I will work on this. In fact, her PhD, or part of the PhD, is about what makes citizen sensing a success, or what critically influences the performance of citizen sensing. And I will come back to that. These are just the conceptual issues. When do we think that we deal with citizen sensing? And I think Anna identified already 30 or 50 projects in the world that we could name citizen sensing. This slide is about a project that was at ETH Zurich named Open Sense, but this is, forget later on, this is not citizen sensing, but it is necessary because this technology, it's technology driven and it has improved the technology. It was a project in the city of Zurich based on ozone, carbon monoxide and particulate matter. And actually, what the citizens could do with this is reading, because that's very important, that you can have real-life data. So citizens adapt. They could take another route for cycling to their work if particular parts of the cities were or had a high level of air pollution. But it is not that bad in Zurich. It was just an experiment. But these type of projects improving the technology of sensing is very much necessary to improve citizen sensing. So what happens with the outcomes of this project is that some companies will bring it to the market, and after it has been brought to the market, it can be used, and the price has dropped, it can be used by citizens in their own projects. This is a kind of visualization of a network of citizen sensing. Now, when is it a success, citizen sensing, or when is the performance satisfactory, or however you name it? It's a problematic, of course, a label success. But it is a success if citizens are not exposed anymore to the, for them, undesired health risk. Could be by changing their own behavior, take another more healthy biking route. Could also be, and more importantly, of course, changing the behavior of the organization or the authority or the institutional actor that causes the health risk, which may be mitigating the impact, like around the runways at Schiphol, nice hills have been created to reduce the influence of ground noise. Changing the behavior of the organization, so that was mitigating. And of course, another and much more important and fundamental, and also subject to much more debate, is ceasing causing the risk. But we also think, and that is that we have, as the theoretical background, social capital theory, learning theory, boundary spanning theory. There's already a success if the organization or the authority and the citizens learn how to improve risk governance in making decisions. Now, this is actually what we would like to do with these 40, 50, or maybe more projects in the world, is that finding out what the critical factors are, and then understanding how later on, and that's I think, very attractive proposal, to see how, in fact, the background, the institutional forces, the interaction, how that can be integrated in decision making, but at a much earlier stage than is now the case. Monocomponents, the nature of the problem, differentiate much. We have different material fields, like in the health risk, noise, annoyance, air quality, radiation, water quality, and some more magnetic waves. There is a gap, but it may be different, the gap between citizens' perception of exposure to health risk and the reaction of the institution. So there's always a kind of clash involved. And there is a particular seriousness of the health risk, like radiation. We don't know exactly about it, but it's also one that you cannot see, you cannot smell, so radiation is one. And then these projects of citizen sensing also differ very much in terms of scale and number of citizens involved, and also the coherence within the project between the citizens that want to change the situation. So far, my part, I would like to invite Anna to continue. This one.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for having me here, and a special thanks to Professor Van Henhausen for having me invited. Okay, so let's keep going. So we throughout our research, we understood that there were some specific elements that were particularly important to determine our results. And among them, the technical characteristics of the problems are particularly important because reliability, accuracy, impartiality are really important to understand to what extent this citizen sensing project is going to be listened by institutional actors. Then, of course, the duration of the project. We took two cases. One started in 2003, one in 2009, and that already creates a big gap between the two projects and also a big technological evolution. And throughout the case developments, technology develops itself. And so also the time should be taken into account. Then, of course, the scale of the project, to what extent the projects gain attention from the institutional side, from a broader public attention, is also relevant. And lastly, to what extent is supported by external institutions. Okay, then why we selected the two cases? Well, you probably don't know which cases, so the two cases selected are two cases of controversies about noise pollution surrounding big airport hubs. And these two airports are the London Heathrow Airport and the Schiphol Amsterdam Airport. So two big, crucial airport hubs in the world. And the controversy in both cases is in balancing the right of the people to their quiet, to their healthy environment, and on the other side, the interest of relevant stakeholders of an economic growth. And again, in both cases, they produced accessible maps, which was really facilitating our research because we could access these maps online, evolving in real time, and conveying noise data. And lastly, the two cases are particularly illuminating for the citizen sensing for problem solving because we have a specific problem and a specific attempt to solve it. Okay, Amsterdam, Schiphol. So the controversy started, and probably the Dutch people among you are familiar with this controversy, as the Polderbaan construction, the fifth runway in 2003. And the controversy was about the clash between the state approach to only calculate noise based on mathematical models and the people's perception that noise could be measured because they were exposed to this noise impact every day and they want to have a sort of factual evidence of the noise they were exposed to. And so what they did is actually an ICT trained guy, and this is what Professor was saying before about having increasing smart citizen among the citizens who decide to set up a noise monitoring system, very simple, based on microphones put on the roof of the houses of the neighboring sites surrounding Amsterdam and Leiden. And they were assessing noise levels, then connecting to their personal computer, connecting to a central server, and displaying this information on a near real-time live map. And this platform, from a very bottom-up, step by step, attracted institutional attention to the point that a professional foundation, Geletsnet, sorry for the bad Dutch pronunciation, adopted it and decided to fund it, and numerous municipalities decide to join and to use this platform as their official system for monitoring noise. And so we see that there was a clash from the institutional side and the bottom-up level, but a sense of convergence, because some municipality actually realized that there was potential. And so this sort of convergence also brought to some conceivable impact. It's really hard to draw causal links between some happenings that we realized and real connection. But we can somehow assume that there was a link. For example, the Nomos Online is the Skipo noise monitoring online system, took inspiration from the sensor. So from SensorNet, so from the bottom up. And also we saw that there was a sort of change in how the noise information was conveyed. For example, there are increasing material published about noise-reducing flying techniques and more grounding landscaping techniques to reduce and mitigate noise. So this can actually make us argue that there was some impact. Beyond the convergence, there was also some institutional measure, concrete and tangible. Okay, this is just an example of image from the map. As you can see, it's really user-friendly. People can see where their measurement is located and see then with the number, the level of noise they are exposed to. Okay, moving to the Heathrow case. Heathrow case is similar in the sense that there was the same feeling of a high noise burden, a low transparency in the way in which the public was informed about the noise burden, and also an ongoing discussion about the building of a third runway, which besides is still open. Another expert of ICT and geospatial studies created this LHR noise map project where people with their smartphone, so no longer microphone, but already their smartphones, could measure noise levels and then tag the noise measurement, take a picture if they wanted to the aircraft, if they could, or just adding some extra information, and then upload it online. So there was no really convergence because this sort of map rested somehow in the public domain, but without being adopted by any stakeholders, and somehow a limited convergence, a limited clash because there was no such big clash. But yet, there was a sort of social accountability discourse triggered. Way more and more people started discussing the noise levels. And also, we could pinpoint some conceivable impacts, among which the Fly White and Green table, which was an initiative to mitigate and to score aircraft producing more noise rather than other, and prefer the first one. So this is just a figure of the maps, how it looked like. Okay, moving to the causal factors. As I said, it's really hard to understand causality, but we could identify some triggers, critical factors that somehow enhanced the citizen sensing potential. And these two are a sense of distrust, as mentioned before, towards the way the risk was governed by the institutional actors, and also a desire to solve it proactively, so that citizens take responsibility to solve a problem they don't like how it's governed at the moment. Okay, and then there are some key characteristics of the sensing project that made the difference, and among which the fact that the project can produce accurate and reliable data, which is really important. Then the fact that it can gain a sort of support by a number of relevant stakeholders, so recognition. And lastly, the challenging of institutional strategy to improve risk governance, so not just distracting something, but constructing something new. doesn't go, I would do it this way. Oh no, there's something here. I don't know what it pooped. Okay, now, facilitators for problem solving is somehow a condition that enhanced the factors that we mentioned before, and this was a sort from the bottom and from the top, a creation of a trusted dialogue, a shared understanding about the risk problem, and in the Amsterdam case, the integration of the bottom-up solution in the top-down system, which is very important, and lastly, the top-down recognition of the problem, because when the institutional actors do not recognize that there is a problem, they will never achieve shared solution. So, what we really score as the real problem-solving potential, and it's just one action or activities, let's say, is the recognition of the urgency of the problem, but also the solving through actual measures. And this is, has been identified in both projects, so conceivable concrete measures that could be related to the sensing. But in all cases, so landscaping, reducing time for landing and so on, but all these are mitigating the noise. So there was not any cut of number of flights, for example. And so we discussed about maybe citizen sensing as a potential to mitigate the problem, but not to take bigger decision as cutting the number of flights in a day and so on. So, and also it's a temporary solution because as we see in Amsterdam recently, the recent developments show that there is a new attempt to grow and also that there are new contracts ongoing preventing the residents to claim their noise level. So this Kettingbeding contract that would somehow overturn any need for citizen sensing, or for example, recent Lelystad expansion shows that somehow the institutional agenda keeps going against the citizen wills. Going to future research, I think, and we think this article research has bigger potential. First of all, we haven't gone through interviews with participant citizens. This is something I've been doing with my PhD project, but for this case it would be really interesting to go and talk with the sensing citizens and ask what were their relevant motivations. And this links to the point of what citizen sensing means for the citizens as active members of the community. Does it activate a new form of citizenship, a sense of self-responsibility, more legitimacy? It's all open to discussion. And then we need to continue elaborating on a causal model because as you can see, we identified some causal factors, but we still need more. And for this, we also need future research with a more quantitative approach, because we realized that in our model, we were putting aside some critical factors, some conditions that could have influenced a lot the final outcome, and all these factors should be integrated in a bigger quantitative scale in order to understand which are the relevant factors, which are cross influences, and so on. So this is under discussion, and probably there is a possibility to adopt the rough set analysis for these aims. And lastly, we were discussing the possibility to use all this research to build a sort of tool that policymakers could use to integrate the people's perspective before the rise of a clash and a conflict. And so the idea that incorporating a tool recognizing the potential of citizen-generated data, not just as sensor, but as active and aware analyzers of information, adding this information to what expert-based decision-making already have, could create a potential for problem solving. And this, I think, links to the discussion about dashboards. This kind of tool could well enter in a sort of decision-making strategy that is smarter and aware of the fact that the people are not just recipient of policies, but should be co-creating policies together with public stakeholders. So I think that's all. It's really open to debate. I would like to, open for discussion and debate. We don't have a lot of time, but maybe just a bit.
Indeed, not much time, so I'll open the floor for a question. Have a question? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think this is really a very interesting new approach. But I have a few observations. First, if distrust is one of the reasons for introducing a system of citizen sensing, if there's a general distrust in what policymakers are doing or disregarding the interests of citizens, is then just focus on noise. Is that a way to measure noise, or is it just a way of expressing your general dissatisfaction with the interest given to citizens' interest? So you might use noise, or you do use noise as an instrument to measure general dissatisfaction. And people would express their dissatisfaction with noise level as a general expression for general distrust, rather than having a clear indication of the real noise level. Because I really doubt, and if you look into the statistics, we also know this, there's a lot of variation, there's a lot of noise in the measurement of noise. So all in all, I'm not entirely convinced. So the causality would, in my view, require much more attention. And does the sensor really measure what it ought to measure, or does it measure some general level of dissatisfaction which is completely different? And I give you one small anecdotal example. I'm one of the victims in your runway analysis. So I'm living rather close by to one of the runways. That is nice. And I like that, by the way. Sometimes, now comes my story, sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up because I have to finish a paper, I'm restless, or sometimes I wake up because of the noise of all the animals around the house. Swans, goose, ducks, whatever you name it, and I wake up and I can't sleep anymore. And then I hear an airplane, and I can't sleep anymore. That's the airplane, of course, is the cause of my sleepless night. No, it was the duck. You see, so it's still the question, what are we measuring?
I think you're right. Causality is the first and foremost issue that we need to keep in mind when we are not only measuring, but making interpretations. That is an important point. The distrust issue, I'm not sure, but I cannot prove it right now, that distrust caused by noise is actually related to a much broader feeling of distrust. It could be, but we need to check that. And if so, we of course have a causality issue. Thank you very much, Peter, for this idea.
Yeah, I'd like to add to this discussion by, rather than talking about causality, talking about selectivity. And the issue I'm thinking of is that historically, it doesn't matter what kind of data we've been gathering to deal with some socioeconomic problem or environmental problem. We always have this problem of representativeness of the available information. Now, it almost sounds like when you move to citizens censoring or citizen science, well, you know, all citizens are involved, so surely this must be representative. But I'm not sure that's always the case, because there's still some kind of selectivity. We still have some kind of form of digital divide or participation differences, so there's lots of heterogeneity among the citizens you're talking about, which in my view can give you more weight to certain groups of citizens than to others. So the question is, how do you control to ensure that in the end the results, that the data you analyze, the results you work with are representative of all citizens rather than on certain subgroups?
I can Try to follow up a bit on your question is the dilemma behind my PhD, basically. So it's not something I heard for the first time, because so far all the interviews I've been talking with for my PhD project are male, middle-aged, well-educated, maybe with a PhD, and expert of ICT. So the digital divide is definitely huge. And what I'm trying, and I think it's one of the problems, and we stated that in the article we are working on, the sensing citizens are not the citizens, are a subgroup. So are those citizens that are in between experts and citizens. They are already those who decide to join. So the housewife with a lot of troubles would not join. And the discussion open now is how should we prevent that this we don't claim representativeness, but we claim that there is an improvement. So at least it's not just policymakers. There are also people that rely on, and sometimes these experts in between the citizen can motivate other people that do not necessarily have any PhD or stuff. And a point is, should we consider, for example, making citizen sensing tools available in public libraries, so this way more people can gain access to it, and it's something that in Arizona has been very popular, now broader, like even old or very young people can use it. And the other point is the urgency of the risk. So in Fukushima, for example, in the nuclear disaster, it resulted that the urgency of the risk actually mitigated the selectivity. Because then people, when the risk is really urgent, feel that they should do something beyond any class or welfare and stuff. So this could be a solution, well, not a solution, but at least that when a risk is really pressing, then more social fringes activate for solving it. But for example, for noise pollution, air pollution, still there's not this big urgency.
I'm fine.
Yeah. Albert Meyer, Utrecht University, Utrecht School of Governance. Compliments with your presentation. I think this is very, very interesting work. My question actually follows up on some of the previous questions. The idea, I wonder what you're measuring in your performance dimension, because it seems to me that you're measuring to what extent they're getting better health. But the issue here seems to be whether citizens trust government decisions. So in that sense, you would think it's more about citizens trusting the way decision-making proceeds. And Tyler, you may be familiar with his work, makes a distinction between procedural and substantive justice. And procedural justice means that people can trust the system because of the procedures that have been followed, even though the outcome is different from what they want. Whereas substantive justice is the idea that they get the outcome they want. So maybe in terms of evaluating what you're looking, it might be interesting to look at this procedural justice to see to what extent they can trust the decisions that have been made on the basis of the information instead of the outcomes. So I wonder how you think about that.
Yeah, I think we take the so-called process characteristics also into account. So which steps are being taken in the interaction between citizens and authority, which steps are being taken, and how long do these steps last? And what is the improvement? So we don't see success as something that is fixed somewhere, but we are measuring particularly steps in improvement or not an improvement, in worsening the situation. It's also possible. So we certainly have attention for the process characteristics of these processes of interaction between the citizens and the authority or the city. But the point is that citizens get, and I think that's an important issue, citizens get smarter and smarter.
Okay, thank you very much.